chat or in the Q&A section about some of the cybersecurity. Please engage in the chat. I think those questions will be able to um, diversify our conversation here today outside what I've prepared in terms of the official content. Simon, is the session being recorded or streamed on YouTube as we speak?
It's just a stream on YouTube, especially for those
Good.
maybe who log out before it ends and maybe due to technical hitches. They can get, I'll have the link shared to Gwen in charge of ICT Authority and the program. Then she can share the link later so that those who might have hitches can still now watch it on YouTube later through their emails.
Super. Fantastic. All right, cool. So allow me to share my screen. Where is the share button? There you go. There you go. So again, as I've mentioned, please feel free to, at any point in time, share your comments, share your thoughts in the chat and the Q&A. And as I go along, I'm sure I'll find time every now and then to take a peek at the chat and the Q&A. Okay. So I want to safely assume by now, wow, just a minute. Something is wrong here. Give me a second. Simon, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I can see it, but you can, I don't know if it's the, the way you do the slides to now to only show the, we are also seeing the other, you see the tile on the other end that has the slide 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. I get you.
You can do a full display. That would be better.
Okay. Haya, sawa.
That's
I think
better.
we're good, eh? Okay. All right, cool. So yeah, high level, I work in cybersecurity and data protection. So I think those are the two key things we'll be covering over the next 3 days. And if you will be attending the 3 days, you're going to cover extensively a lot of fundamentals for cybersecurity today and tomorrow, which would give you an understanding of the what, the why, um, some um, an overview of what the security landscape looks like. And here we are talking about digital security landscape in terms of the issues that are out there, in terms of the threats and the attacks that are out there, both at an organizational and individual level. And then thereafter, of course, discuss some of the obvious and unobvious challenges and possible solutions that way organizationally we can implement or individually we can consider. I think that should be able to give us enough capacity, particularly at individual level, to be able to take care of our own personal safety. And then later on tomorrow, I know we would cover a bit more, I don't want to use the word technical, but a bit more advanced kidogo stuff. And that it ideally would bring home the fact that, yes, as much as we just want to educate ourselves, it's important to think of all these things within the context of the changes and the dynamics that are going on in the world right now, inclusive of emerging technology, particularly with regards to artificial intelligence and related technologies. So that will be covered tomorrow, and you definitely should be excited for that. So for now, let's start with the basics. Um, what is cybersecurity? Why is it important? What makes cybersecurity? What are the objectives? These are important things to know, especially as a layman, because here's the thing: we are not an island, and each of us is part of some community, some organization, some enterprise somewhere, where this is probably potentially a conversation that is had from time to time, or at least needs to be had, right? Because we all are using technologies, we all are using networks and all sorts of digital systems. So then we need to be able to think about our safety and trust, and security is a critical part of that. So generally, cybersecurity is the whole practice of being able to protect systems, to protect data, to protect anything associated with digital systems. And I'm using the word here digital very intentionally, because when you normally think about cybersecurity, that's the first thing that comes to mind, right? IT, everything IT, that's the first thing that comes to mind. So whether it is your mobile device, whether it is your laptop, whether it is your server, whether it is your gaming devices at home, or the ones that you bought for your kids, or whether it's even your car, right? It's still a computer. I mean, there are all of these different digital systems that are technology, IT-based systems that are out there. But of course, we typically extend the cybersecurity practice beyond just hardcore hardware and software. Yeah, which form hardware, software, networks, and databases, which form IT. So we are looking at it extends further into processes, it extends further into policies and the whole governance aspect to it. It extends into programs. So programs here, we are looking at programs that are geared towards addressing risks. And of course, the nature of risks is not just technical, it's not just technology based, but risks come from operations. That's why there's a whole framework of operational risk. Risks come from people, your colleagues, your risks can come from your physical spaces where you live, where you work, your offices, and all that. So there's a whole spectrum of what cyber in the word cyber could cover. It's not just technology; it can be technology, physical, abstract, right? It can be process based, etc., etc. So that's sort of the whole rim. So being able to put safeguard and measures to be able to protect these entire scope of things, then that forms for you the whole cybersecurity universe, right? And what are we protecting ourselves from? We're protecting ourselves against threats and from bad actors or bad um, um, systems that are out there that could potentially cause harm in the form of attacks within our own environment. So within the public sector, cybersecurity is important. And of course, when we talk of public sector, we are looking at the whole government systems, top down, across board, horizontally, right? And that I've already mentioned, government is not one thing; it's the whole system, which includes both the physical hardware and the non-physical hardware, right? So in this case, can look at we can categorize it broadly. Firstly, looking at data. So government is hugely data hungry, right? Hugely data hungry. Government operates on information. And that information is data, which turns into information if you think of it technically. But data and information is what really forms operations of government, same to any other enterprise, really. We are looking at all sorts of infrastructure, hardware, the software related, and a good bunch of government infrastructure is actually highly crucial. In this case, we call them critical, right? There are certain sectors that are super, super critical, especially those that are um, um, those infrastructure areas that are supposed to provide critical services, critical mass services, right? Those areas that help support our very basic needs. Starting with water, starting with air, starting with energy, etc. So you shall look at that in a few. And then of course there's the general public service delivery system. The processes, top to bottom and all that. So the entire scope of government needs security. And of course, we know within the government, most governments, there's always an office, a department, or a ministry that then is tasked being able to oversee and implement and operate all things cybersecurity. And of course, with our government, we have the Ministry of ICT. Under there, we have department, divisions like, the Communication Authority, the ICTA, we have NC4, which is a whole committee altogether for security, etc., etc. So why is then security truly important? within the public sector. Fundamentally, security is the basic reason for security is the same whether it's public or private. But public sector is, as I've already mentioned, and just to emphasize it, is because government manages a lot of data, and not just a lot of data, a lot of critical sensitive data. From the moment you were born, the government already has information about you. And this information keeps stacking. Your record keeps expanding and increasing. And it keeps, and it's very dispersed across many different government agencies, different government ministries. So you kind of have your entire life, for instance, life data, life record, in the hands of government, right? So this is a lot of critical information. That is why it is super important to be able to have security and privacy, for the public sector. Governments is the biggest, I would say, entity in any country, and of course, uh, because it's the biggest, ideally, it will have, um, the biggest not capability rather, but the biggest coffers, right? This government is collecting revenue, collecting money. So government has money. Government has data, which is a very high value, asset. Government has, systems, that are critical to the citizenry. So that then makes government a high target, a critical target for cyber threats, right? And so these threats, if they are realized, they can have very grave, widespread effect on the economy, on the lives of citizens, on the quality of lives, on service delivery, and all of these harmful effects. So we then need to be able to have controls and safeguards to be able to, assure, you know, assure the government against some of these bad activities. And of course, we see over and over, year in, year out, rising threats, and attacks, towards government. And there are a lot of incidences, and some of these are very common, some of these are age old, but they're still effective, and they're still, being targeted and thrown against, the entire public sector, right? And so we see these threats and attacks increasing over and over again. So it is only logical and natural that the government, that we all within the public space be able to, really think about how to effectively implement security, right? And we over the last decade, we've seen a lot of governments, um, putting in a lot of effort, a lot of, investment in digitizing their systems, right? So the whole, government digitization programs, whether it is e-government, systems, public infrastructure systems, whether it is, things like, digital ID systems. So all these different, digital transformation programs that the government is trying to do to increase efficiencies and keep up with good service delivery within the public sector space, then requires protection fundamentally. They require protection. Does that? So these form very hefty reasons as to why we, especially as public servants, need to be keen, and why our own agencies or the various, MCDAs that we are part of need to be able to care about security, because at the end of the day, we are workers in government, but we are also, customers of government, in one or another. So we need to care for, about these privacy and security things, within the government, space. So I already mentioned, fundamentally, when you start talking about security, you always talk from, we want to look at the bad stuff first, right? We want to look at what could possibly go wrong, right? So we've already talked about what and why of security, but then let's start with what could go wrong, and then we work backwards. So what could go wrong here looks like this. You can categorize it in three ways. So one, you will think risk broadly. So risks, as I've already mentioned, is not just digital. Could be all sorts of different types and fashions of risk. But then you could narrow that down to, threats, what we call threats. So Threats are just basically the bad stuff that could happen, but of course, bad stuff just don't happen. It is actually done or realized by something or someone, right? Nothing happens from oblivion, and then that threat can then materialize, and then it turns into a proper attack, a proper cyber incident, and all that stuff that then actually leads to actual harms to the systems or the people in and around those systems. So it is then critical to be able to think about, to look at the threat landscape, what is the threat environment right now? And I'm going to run through a bunch of different pertinent threats that we've seen that have been a lot persistent, a lot common. They're still very old, but they're effective because somewhat the more they age, the more they become even effective because they keep changing. It could be the same type of threats, but it keeps on changing in terms of their delivery, how they're delivered, or in terms of adopting new technologies to be able to effect those threats, leading to successful attacks and all that. So one of the critical category here is malwares. So malwares really basically just means malicious software. If you combine those two words, malicious and software, right? So this is the broad category of all sorts of softwares that are built or can be used for malicious intentions, right? It could one be a software that has been built specifically to cause harm, maybe to shut down systems in a factory, or it could be a software that has a legitimate use, has a legitimate purpose, but then it can be repurposed and be used illegitimately, right? So at the end of the day, the intention is be able to cause havoc, maybe some sort of disruption to services, to service delivery, to systems and all of that. So that's the broad scope of what malicious software are. And of course, one of them is ransomware. And ransomware is normally ranked number one because it's for two reasons. One, it is in the recent past, we've seen it we've seen a lot of cases of ransomware. And I think the part of the reason is that it's really quite effective, and it's hard to deal with. It's actually hard to be able to address a ransomware attack, and I'll explain why. Right? But firstly, ransomware generally it's ransom. It's a combination of the word ransom and software. So it is a software that uses the concept of paying a ransom to be able to cause havoc. What do I mean by this? It basically means that you would have a software, or let's call a hacker. A hacker would have a software. They will inject that software within a particular system, and then what then that software would do? That software would um, will encrypt will encrypt all the data that is within that system. By encryption here, we mean that it will take all that data and just turn it into gibberish, right? It will turn it into unusable information, unusable data. It will more or less decode that data so that it becomes non-functional to the authorized users. So, and by doing that, once it has done that, then it will ask that particular user or that particular organization to be able to pay something, to pay a ransom in this case, for them, for the owners of the ransomware, be able to decrypt that data for their use. So basically, it's like hijacking, right? Today, a family member gets hijacked, and then you're asked to bring 1 million to a secret location, and then they release your relative, right? It's the same thing, right? So challenge about this, as I've mentioned, is hard to deal with. It's because it's very hard to find those what we call decoding keys once they're encoded. Once they're encoded, it's very hard to find those encryption keys. So ideally, in a lot of cases, you find organizations opt to pay that ransom in secret, so that they get the keys to be able to decrypt that information, so that they can use them, or alternatively, they have the option of recovering the data from their backups that they might have had at some point in time. So in that sense, it's very hard to deal with. but it's a very rampant threat, and we've seen a lot of it being used in sectors like healthcare, right? Healthcare is very critical. Imagine you have your relative in hospital admitted, probably is supported by medical devices and machines, and then that hospital is attacked by a ransomware, and now the doctors can't be able to access the patient information, can't be able to access medical information, can't be able to perform medical operations on those devices that are supporting the life of your relative, right? Imagine there's a total shutdown of medical service delivery. So that means people can die, patients can actually die. Patients cannot be medicated. Patients might get affected with other diseases just because the systems are not working right in that sense. So if you put that picture, just healthcare as a one example, that tells you why then it's important to even think about security. And we've seen these across healthcare, we've seen this across financial institutions, we've seen these. And financial here could mean in public sector, could mean the stock market, right? It could mean that, the central banks, where everything, where our financial, national financial exchange, happens. So imagine that financial exchange system, the national financial system, it's shut down. And we've seen this in some African countries, where the central bank has had to shut down systems, and then there was, banks could not, interact with the central bank, and the central bank could not interact with other foreign, partners and all that. So it becomes a whole problem, right? So yeah, so that's ransomware, and here there's some examples as I've mentioned. We've seen a rise and rise and rise in the general malware trends, specifically ransomware. And here's just a case of South Africa where we had a ransomware, of the defense department. This is the military, right? Military was attacked by a ransomware gang, and then it then can lead to failure of military intelligence. It could probably be a prelude, to probably, who knows, other attacks, other insider attacks and things like that, right? Or alternatively, information of our intelligence officers, intelligence operations can then be leaked. When the ransomware comes, it decrypts everything, sends information back to hackers, and those hackers can post that information on Twitter. Imagine information of military intelligence is on Twitter. That can lead to all sorts of harms, right? All sorts of threats to the national security and things like that. So again, why cybersecurity is important. One useful example here is this ransomware called Medusa. This was in 2023. There's a ransomware that was codenamed Medusa, and I think the Kenya Airport Authority was one of the victims, plus many other organizations across the world. So it's not just a Kenya problem anyway. A few other categories. We have this thing called we have some threats and attacks that attack our websites, right? So if you think about your website, behind your website, there are many other things that are running that normal people, we do not see unless we probably have the technical knowledge. But behind every website, there's a whole ecosystem of technologies, of systems that are running to be able to serve your content through that particular website. Yeah. So so here we're talking about threats that will attack websites, the technologies that support those websites, and that can then lead to the disruption. Yeah, that can then lead to the disruption of access to information through those websites, right? And I'll give an example. So majority of the attacks, in this, for government, of course, we realize that they'll typically um, we dealt to some sectors that are critical. I've already mentioned healthcare, I've mentioned financial, and financial here by there is critical. Think of it this way, for example, your e-citizen, right? Which is fundamentally, it's a critical infrastructure. If there's a web attack on e-citizen, and e-citizen is unavailable for 24 hours, you can imagine that even 24 hours is a long time. Especially now that we have a lot of government services being paid through e-citizen, then that becomes a huge national security issue or national issue because it has various fonts, economic, social, etc. So, you know, there are these critical websites run by government that I think can be attacked, and it's important to be able to put web security measures around these websites. Some of how some of these things happen is, there are people within those government agencies that have the authority to be able to access records that are behind the scenes, access records through these websites, right? So, we can have passwords being stolen, usernames being stolen. You can have some websites that have vulnerabilities because the developers of those websites did not implement security measures when they are developing. We could have websites that have databases behind them, and most governments do because they absorb information and they store that information for records, for processing, service delivery, and all that. So these databases can still be impacted, by attacks. So you realize that it's not just a web. Web is one thing. Behind it, there's a database. Behind it, there are other web technologies. Behind it, there are probably other systems that can be impacted. As I've already mentioned, for example, the CPK system, which is within the CPK, the National Financial Exchange. If that is impacted in any way at some point, then it becomes of a whole financial crisis within the country. So of course, there are various things that you can do in terms of just appreciating security, and this is even for individuals, particularly of us who are here. Normally, we have these very basic web security things you want to consider. For example, there's something called secure socket layer, which is this SSL, and then we also have TLS. So right now we are looking at TLS, and TLS is the new format where when you're looking at your website, you normally should go look at the top right, not really top right, at the left side of your browser, where the link of the website you want to visit is. On the left side, typically, if the website has a level of security, they would typically have a green padlock there that tells you that they're implementing what you call TLS security. So just a very simple mechanism that comes with a lot of websites, and developers can easily implement this. It is not 100% proof. It has a bunch of its weaknesses, but it's good enough to be able to provide fast level defense. So whenever you're browsing, where the link of the website is, try and see if there's a green padlock. If there's a green padlock, that means there's assurance of TLS security there. If there's no green padlock, if it is red especially, then yeah, it would be red and unlocked. Then you'll know that indeed probably not TLS security. For the noise, just give me a sec. So okay, good. So I think we can move on. My Simon, please alert me on the time. Let me know if I need to move a bit fast or not, but I'll try to quicken it. So one last thing, this is very fundamental. All of us can do it every other day. Is that these things we call patches. So patches are basically, the way when, especially when you are younger, and you have a shot that is torn, and then it is taken to a fundi, and then the fundi does the anaweka ile patch, yeah. So you can do the same concept in technology where if there's a weakness or there's an issue with a certain software, website, and all that, we can actually create a small piece of software, a small piece of code that then you can use to patch that weakness, that hole, just specifically to deal with that issue. And all that does is that that's what we call patches. It just fixes that issue, and then if you find another issue, you can keep on doing the same thing. So there's this thing called patches that can be applied. A lot of them they applied. You can be applied automatically. You just need to have that setting on within your application or within your mostly within applications, Microsoft that we use, Microsoft Offices, WPS, all these collaboration tools that we have. Most of them have these, and they probably do it on a regular once a month or twice a month or on demand basis when there's an issue that needs to be solved. And then also your usual updates, so most of the apps are updated. Sometimes when you log into an app, they ask you accept this update, install these updates, or try trying 24 hours, trying to do that. So just be sure to be able to update those ones at the earliest, right? Just apply those updates. It's as easy as clicking a button, in most cases. Okay. So one key area that is very relatable and important at personal security level is mobile. So all of us have some form of mobile device, right? Whether it's a laptop, an iPad, etc. So we have some form of mobile device, and we have those ones that are being issued by our own, agencies or government organizations. All of these things, all of these devices, right? So we have a set of attacks that then target these devices because these devices are used by each of us individually as end users. And one idea about these type of threats is that it is safely assumed that as an individual, especially as someone who's not technical, probably working in security, doesn't care much about security, you'll be very lazy, you'll be sluggish, you'll be lax in terms of keeping this secure. So that then means that you are a target, right? The fact that you have that device, you are a target, even if it is being managed by organization. You are still a target. So you can be the reason why an organization can be attacked or can be hacked just simply because you probably do not practice due care, you do not have some personal digital hygiene and all that. Yeah, so all sorts of mobile devices, including our TVs now, including our printers now, which is at home, which is at work, and all of these sets of devices can have weaknesses that can lead to all forms of threats within our personal, digital environment, organization. And then, as I've mentioned, most attackers will privilege malwares, all sorts of malicious softwares to be able to um, break into these devices, stay in those devices for a while, and then actually launch an attack that might spill over to your organization. You are attacked individually, but then that can spill over to your organization potentially because organization data was in your personal phone and then it got stolen and then it was shared publicly or in some forum somewhere. It could be that you connect to your organization via a certain remote channel, and then you are compromised, and then the hacker was able to what we call lateral movement, can be able to move from your device all the way back to the servers within the organization, and then attack the organization. So it can be, we call them vectors. So the vectors or the ways with which a threat can propagate can vary differently based on various scenarios. So then how do we address this in terms of mitigation? So here you would obviously want to straightforwardly download legitimate applications all the time, right? All the time. So if it is Zoom, don't just go Google Zoom.apk from anywhere and then download. Actually go and download from the Play Store, from the Apple Store, all that, or download from the legitimate Zoom site, right? You just don't want to download any software, right? Because the moment you install it, you don't have the technical capability to test it, to test the traffic that happens behind the scenes, to test the code that runs behind the scenes to know if it is legitimate, right? So to get from the legitimate sites, there's a level of assurance there. Use strong passwords, use multi-factor authentication. Here is where we are saying, hey, when you log into any system or a website, yes, use your username and your password, but then also add your phone number there so that you can get what you call the OTP through your phone or through your email, and then input that as a second level of authenticating that you actually who you're supposed to be. You can do a second level authentication or a third level authentication, right? And there are all sorts of things you would want to consider. Mostly it's a case of what what you have. So what could be your username and password. What you have could even be a physical security token, like a USB that you have, you can work with. You can plug it to your laptop, and then once you plug that in, there's a code there that runs that then elicits you to be able to log in with your username and password. So it's more like a token, right? You can have some sort of a token and all that stuff. So there are all these different scenarios, but the bottom line idea is that there are multiple levels of verifying that you're the actual authorized person to access a system or an application. And that technical mechanisms helps with that assurance. And then lastly, of course, for those who are a bit more technical, you might want to think about hardening your systems. So systems here could be your firewall, could be your mobile phone, right? It could be as easy as going to your right now, going to your mobile phone, going to your settings, going to your applications, and then for each application, look at the permissions that each application has. Which permissions have you given to the application? You know, turn off those permissions that are not necessary, right? Right? If your calculator is asking to access your contacts, why should your calculator access your contacts? Because a lot of times we see this. In fact, by default, you don't need, it doesn't even ask you. Right now, if you go, I'm sure you might find, oh, your calculator is actually accessing your contacts. Question is why, right? Does it really need for it to do a 1+1 mathematics? It does not. It does not need your contacts. So it can be as easy as that. That's what we call hardening. You're just getting rid of all the necessary settings and necessary permissions and all that, so that you only remain with the things that you really need. And then in that way, you'll be reducing your risk environment, the risk environment within your mobile application, laptop, etc., etc. Um, okay, good. Another critical one, and this relates a lot to government, but the public sector largely, is what we call nation state attacks. So nation state attacks here, we're talking about all all the forms of threats and attacks that are targeted or instigated, actually are propagated by nations. By nations here, we're talking about government, and government could be military, government could be security agency, government could be some black ops group, whatever it is. Point is that there's a government that is launching an attack. There's a government that is probably being targeted, right? So in this case, some of the reasons for these nation state attacks could be things like just espionage, right? You want to understand what the other government is doing in terms of their research and development work. You, you want to spy on some some government ongoings. We want to be able to sabotage some things within a target government. We want to disrupt services, right? As I already mentioned, it could be as easy as disrupt as launching a nation's attack on KPLC, you know, and then KPLC has a blackout and the entire country is blacked out for 24 hours. I think we've seen these blackouts the last 2023, 2024, and you are all up in arms because KPLC was down for a whole night, a whole day, so imagine that disruption goes for a week, because of a cyber attack. So again, public sector has this critical infrastructure that then very, very important targets for nation state attacks. Right. Some examples here we see, for example, here, Kenya's digital infrastructure under threat. So we're looking at, I don't know if you guys heard, but there was this case of an anonymous Sudan that was trending, some hackers in Sudan who attempted and, sort of successfully um, um, launched an attack on some Kenyan digital places, some websites, defacements here and there, and things like that. That could be considered some form of a nation state attack. We do not know exactly this group was sponsored by quote unquote Sudan government. I hope I'm not misquoted. I'm just making a scenario. Or it could be, they're sponsored by some other, governmental agencies. The same thing as we see, sometimes we've seen this in the news. So this is all public information, right? Where we saw some, hackers in Egypt who attacked Ethiopian government agencies. And the reason for this was, I think years ago when there's a huge tension between Ethiopia and Egypt with regards to the Nile Dam that Ethiopia was building, and it was sort of limiting water flow, to Egypt, the natural water flow to Egypt. So there was Egypt attacking Ethiopia at a national level. Those are things that are happening, including in the many current wars that you're seeing in the Middle East, wherever. All these things are still happening. So just so you know, um, Um, then we have what we call supply chain attacks. So this generally try and are attacks that are propagated, maybe not so directly to the target organization, but it could be to their vendors, to their suppliers, their general supply chain, right? And typically it tries the bad actors try to look for weaknesses, um, um, weaknesses in the vendors and suppliers of that target organization, and then use that as a way in, particularly in cases where maybe it's a bit more difficult, a bit more costly, a bit more high resistance to attack that target organization, directly. But that notwithstanding, this can be tricky to deal with because it is attack that is launched on a different party, not you as a target organization, right? And we've seen these in cases where, for example, in the UK, we had there was a company that was supplying the UK Homeland Security with the police officers' IDs, right? Their smart IDs. So that company was hacked, and a lot of police information, police officers' information were released and published publicly. Um, and so you could understand get officers' names, which um, which places they are deployed, which departments they're deployed in, what are their police numbers and things like that. So imagine the level of threats some of these police officers or their families could face, right? And just because one of their suppliers were breached. So that tells you the seriousness of some of these issues because anyone can be breached and that can have a lot of significant ripple effects. I think this should be the last one, or maybe the second last. We have this thing called phishing, which is a very, 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 very common type of attack, probably the most common, right? Most common, still very effective, still very pertinent, um, and hard to deal with. Also super, super hard to deal with because it has a lot of social nuances. And largely it really leverages natural human tendencies, right? Things that are not necessarily technical or hardcore. It's not like a setting you can just flip and turn on and off, right? So normally hackers would use this thing we call social engineering. So basically what that means is you basically engineer a human person, right? Here you could engineer their mind, their heart, their emotions. You just play around with them, right? It's about playing around with human tendencies, emotions, mind, thinking, their passions, their interests, in a very social way that makes them weak enough for them to be able to give you some form of enablement for you to have access to certain things, certain systems, certain processes, certain places, and things like that, right? One of the common ones you see is where people end up giving out their passwords and usernames, just like that, right? Because you found this stranger who has told you nice things, and then you're like, let me just share. I mean, what can they do? They probably look harmless, right? Or you could find cases where, people are just being nice. Because people are being nice, you decide, I'll just open the door for them using my access card. Aingie afanye shughuli zake and all that, but you probably don't know this person and the intention and stuff like that. So government employees then, particularly are targeted because, and this is my argument, is one, there might not be enough awareness, but again, can awareness really be enough? Or maybe you can talk about continuous awareness and reinforcement of this education as to the need to be able to individually as workers be able to have the consciousness and the awareness of situations like this where you can be engineered, where you can be lied to, and there's a whole of deception tricks that are used for this kind of attacks. And when you shall look at this maybe later on in terms of capability for government, there could be deficiencies in terms of controls beyond education and awareness. There could be deficiencies in terms of controls that can be put in place so that we just don't rely on human effort. Rather, we could have even technical levels of controls, right? Because the argument also goes that if you are trying to fight against some hackers somewhere in in Vietnam, who are targeting, a government agency, and they're high tech, they're, they are learned, they have skills, right? And then they are targeting a government agency here, and they're targeting employees of those government agencies who are not very well aware, very well, versed and conscious. Then you cannot really rely on those employees to be able to sort of resist those threats from these very high skilled and organized groups, right? Doesn't make sense, right? So at some point, you need the technical enablement, technical, implementations of whatever controls to be able to provide an effective layer of defense beyond just people, because people are people, right? So yeah, here we have a range of all sorts of methods and techniques, how phishing can be done. So maybe just to highlight a few, we have email phishing. So email phishing is where, in this case, one day you wake up and you receive an email you receive a new email in your inbox that tells you, oh, I am Ogbe from Nigeria. I am a prince, and I'm wiring money from Kenya. I'm planning to move there and live there permanently. Can you confirm this payment for me, etc., etc.? They ask you for your ID number, your passport number, and things like that. Or they tell you click this link, and then it will take you to somewhere, to a certain website where you can receive a certain good for me. The idea here is that someone wants to deceive you by the method of an email, and it could apply the same thing to SMSs, right? It could be an SMS, it could be an email, it could be your WhatsApp, it could be social media, your Twitter, your Facebook, could be through a post. It could be through a phone call. I think we all have received those phone calls from scammers, right? So whatever, all these different channels could have different names. For example, email could be email phishing. If it is voice, maybe a call on WhatsApp, a call on GSM, Safaricom, Airtel. We could think of it like phishing. So we call it phishing because it's V is for voice. So voice phishing. It could be social media phishing, right? It could be smishing. Smishing here just basically means SMS. So it has to be it's SMS phishing. So it's shortened as smishing and all that. Yeah, and all these other ones here. Some of these there are techniques where the phishing could be targeted to specific high net worth, high level, high value individuals. So this could be the CEOs or the chairman of the board of government agencies or the executive directors of some of these agencies, because those are people who have high level access, high level sensitive access to high level sensitive information. So sometimes you just don't target the kawaida person, who might be easy to lie because they don't have access to the information that the hacker is actually. So they will target the senior individuals, and that's what in that case is what type of phishing in that case is what we call welling, right? So you find this person is referred to as a well, right? It's referred to as a well, right? It's the big boss, the big guy, right? The guy in the big seat, right? So that's called welling. And besides welling, business email compromise is also a very key phishing technique that is also targeted to those senior individuals, right? Where and this is a real life case where a company lost about $25 million just because an employee in finance received an email that says, hey Joe, how are you? There's this transaction about 25 million to this supplier. Please, can you make that transaction within the next 1 hour? It is very, very urgent. Signed off by the boss, right? So the finance person thought it's actually his boss or the CEO, so rather the CEO is actually who's the one who sent that information. So he ended up wiring $25 million to a particular account number that they were given. And so they did that without actually calling the boss and verifying and having the necessary authorizing documentation for that particular transaction. Then what happened later on, he realized that, oops, it's actually not the CEO who sent this. This was a, a fake email, right? This was a fake email. So sometimes you can have such emails. It could even be cloned emails, right? It could look legitimate, but it's actually been cloned. That's what we call clone phishing, right? So it could be cloned even with attachments and things like that. So you look at it, you verify, and you're like, ah, okay, it actually really, really does look legit, but it's actually cloned, right? No, and all of these different types of techniques. The bottom line here is that, I mean, any communication that you did not expect, you you do not reasonably understand, do not action on it until you've actually verified. Talk to the right people, talk to the people need, who should be involved in such form of communication, and confirm fast. If it is actually a legitimate communication, whether it is voice, whether it is email, whether it is SMS, etc. And then beyond that, of course, you'll always want to look at certain things like the spelling of words, things like the phrasing of sentences, because typically how your CEO writes his paragraphs, how he communicates. So some communication might be off, right? Some people are more aggressive with their communication, but if you receive an email from that particular kind of person that is a bit more polite and kind, then you might figure out this might not be that person. Probably this is not how they are demeanor or personalities, or things like those. It could be as easy as checking the signature of the email, checking I'll tell you to check the headers. For those who might want to do this, check the headers of the email. From which email is it being sent from? What is the from email? What is the webmail? The webmail that is out there, let's say at cbk.com, or at icta.go.ke. Is it really ICTA? It could be ICTA, but the C is written in a French, the French syllable or the French letter C, not the actual English C, right? You know, it could be some of those small things. So it's important to be able to be conscious about it. Let me see how we're doing in time. We are okay. And then lastly, there's this whole broad category of what we call insider threats. So all of us are insiders somewhere, right? That's the beauty about everything. We are all insiders somewhere. We're insiders in our family where we were born. We're insiders in our extended family. We're insiders in our churches. We're insiders in our schools. We're insiders in our workplaces, etc. So we are insiders. You're part of some group or some community somewhere, right? Um, and each of us as insiders could be a threat, right? Could be a threat to the group or the community you belong. Um, and so it's important to understand that there are those threats that come from inside. That's the idea here, right? There are those threats that come from the people who are inside, and this is very common. You see a lot of employees who are just not comfortable. They are disgruntled. Uh, they have issues, whether with the management, whether their colleagues, and all that stuff. I've seen issues where employees end up setting up their colleagues, eh, you know, in wrongful allegations or situations. Because you're my colleague, I then go give you my because maybe I'm on leave, so I give you my username and password to log in for you to do something quickly, that is needed, but then once you get access to my account, you end up doing a lot of transactions um, that are illegal, right? That are against the policy. Then that is on me because it is my account that is reflecting in those records, in those activity records. That's one case. It could be a case of someone just stealing those credentials and doing the wrong things with your own accounts within the organization, right? It could be cases of internal employees committing all sorts of frauds, right? And this is again very common examples, all sorts of fraud schemes, right? Um, yeah, but again, sometimes you realize that some of these threats and attacks that actually come from inside. They originate from very very innocent activities, very innocent acts of either acts of omission, right, or very innocent acts of commission on the part of the individuals. Okay, so sometimes it's not always premeditated and intentionally performed. And here's just an example from way back where a US government contractor leaked sensitive NSA documents through unintentional cloud misconfiguration. So someone was probably some cloud engineer somewhere was administering the cloud and doing configuration, but he ended up probably turning off a setting that he should not have, or turning on a setting that he should not have, or whatever combination there was, and documents end up being leaked. Probably documents now became available online. You can actually go to Google and search some NSA documents. Imagine the impact that could have on a government's national security apparatus, right? When potentially critical information becomes public. Yeah. So sometimes it can be very innocent, but still these are threats that originate from inside. And that is why awareness engagements like these, educational, continuous reinforced education at personal level or within the organization is important, because then it helps the organization assure security and privacy, but then also you as an employee, you are able to do the right thing, and be able to be conscious and aware of the things that you're about to do, or the things that you're doing, or the things someone else is doing, so that even you can cover your own self in terms of any eventualities, and organizations normally have all these policies and code of guideline of how to use systems and all that stuff. So, and all of this, for them to make sense, we have to sort of work and do the right thing. So again, or leading on to some sort of cultural or having some sort of norms within organizations as to how we want to handle people's data, or how we want to handle business information and things like that. Okay, so I think I will look at the chart, stop there for a bit, look at the chart. Before we proceed. See, introductions. Briefly say, let me just pick a random one here. So someone is saying, briefly say about espionage. Well, the word espionage is a Spanish word for the art of spying, right? The whole practice of spying. So in this case, of course, we are talking about leveraging digital means to be able to do the spying. So this could look like this. This could look like a case where and no one, please, just as a disclaimer, please do not take this out of context. Where we have a country like China, for example, right? Decides they let me not say China, let me say organization X that creates products or system, creates some digital products or system, some hardware even, for example, right? But then because they built this hardware, they are the original equipment manufacturers. They decide to create a backdoor within those products, and then they sell those products to ICT, right? So ICT will buy those, for example, even antiviruses from this particular organization X that produces them. Then what happens when the ICTA has installed those antiviruses and they're operational and all that stuff? Organization X uses that backdoor that they created in those softwares, the antivirus software, to be able to get access to the information that is in all these computers that have that antivirus installed, within ICT. What does that mean? That means that the manufacturer then is able to potentially, potentially, you know, with a backdoor, potentially even be able to, as I mentioned earlier, move laterally, move within that particular laptop. They can be able to now maybe see folders, or can they be able to read traffic, internet traffic, right? I mean, it's an antivirus. Probably this antivirus has also covers the web. So they can be able to view web activities of users, can be able to, um, um, because emails are probably used on web, they can be able to view emails when they're opened. So imagine some guy somewhere in this manufacturing organization can see the kind of financial transactions that are being done from a person in finance at ICT. Then that means that either this person can collect financial intelligence, and maybe use that financial intelligence to make the next bid, you know, apply the next tender to ICTA, because they kind of know the budget, they kind of know the requirements early, they kind of already have information as the sales cycle. Very again, that's a simple example. It could be as worse as just surveilling on someone, right? It could be that some people are using their work laptop for some personal shenanigans, and then um, uh, all that illicit activities can be exposed, right? Right. Of course, espionage here you're talking now at government scale level would be things like, um, government X deciding to um, hack maybe the networking infrastructure of government Y or nation or another nation Y, with a view of trying to understand um, their debt payment structures or debt payment plans and things like that, so that they are able to the first government is able to negotiate or is able to push for its own agenda of their debts being paid, um, initially. And I know we've had that case in Kenya here, and I just don't want to mention the countries, but could be something like that, or and a lot more complex, sort of black ops, sort of espionage, particularly in countries that in the more developed countries that definitely have a lot of stake in terms of cyber warfare, military warfare, all that stuff. Um, okay. So there's someone asked here. Johanna says, so what is the effect of always accepting website cookies? Is there a security threat here? Now cookies, that's a very timely question, because cookies and cookies management is, is a critical issue. And I can say critical here because most of us don't think of it as such a big deal, but it actually is quite a deal. Yeah. So what are cookies? Let me try and summarize. What are cookies? So cookies basically are small files um, uh, that are created and stored in your laptop, within the browser in your laptop or in your PC, right? Yeah, those files are created and stored in your PCs. And what do these files contain? They contain specific information about a particular website you have visited. About your visit to a particular website. For example, Facebook. You go visit Facebook, that file is generated. It has information of, which Facebook domain you visited, where did you visit, um, you know, um, what are your preferences, and things like that. But then how does it happen? Or typically there's always the cookie pop-up that comes on your screen and asks you accept cookies, or go and change your preferences in terms of cookies. Now, two things with that pop-up that comes on your screen. So one, normally you're given an option of accept cookies. And normally this button, accept cookies, it's always in some colored, it's always colored. Either it's blue, it's red, it's whatever. There's a reason why it's colored. It's colored because the designers of those websites or those cookie banners, call them banners, want you to see that accept cookie first and naturally click it. So typically our eyes visually we just like colorful things. So most of them you'll find them in colored, colored format so that you can be attracted to it and click it. So that's deception. We call it deception, deceptive design. Yeah. And then you find on the other side you're given savior, save your not saves rather, change your preferences or something else that when you click, it takes you to a full view of the banner where you can see which type of cookies, an explanation of which type of cookies are on that website. So you can go and change which ones you want, which one you don't want. It's a quite a process. Most of us don't have the patience. We don't understand the details of that and all that. But having said that, as I wrap up the cookie issue, is that cookies are basically web technologies that are used to record information about your web activities, and this information can then be accessed um, um, by whom? By other websites. Can be accessed by other websites for the purpose of targeting you for some sort of promotion. And in this case, we normally talk about advertising. So they are like they're different types of cookies, like first party cookies, second party cookies, third party cookies, all with different modes of working. Yeah, like in the case of where today you go and visit your favorite car dealer, right? A bazaar. Go to www.cmcmotors.com, right? And then kidogo kidogo, when you go to your Facebook, unaona wamekuadvertisia hapo gari, advertising hapo gari, oh, CMC Motors is trying to advertise this car on offer. Why do you think that happens, right? Could be that cookie, that visit that you made to CMC Motors. So there's a record of that within your browser, and that record is then accessed by this third-party application or platform called Facebook. That then understands that you're probably into cars, and then Facebook then puts in front of you those advertisements related to cars or related to whatever things you like. And then, of course, sometimes when the cookie banner comes on, you can decide I'm going to turn off all cookies and I will only leave all the functional cookies. But then it's always hard to say, even if you've turned on all the cookies, have they really been turned off? Does the website really not actually generate those files and store them? Because sometimes some websites are deceptive. You turn it off, but then they still go ahead and generate those files, right? Or sometimes you can turn off, but those what you call functional, critical, necessary cookies, we need to understand what do they actually do, and things like that. So it might take you to do a bit of scanning of the website, understand the cookies, understand all that, which a bit more technical, but general idea, please, as much as possible, just turn off all the cookies, so that you avoid all the um, ripple effects of or the hard work of trying to figure out, which cookie does what and all that. So I hope that that helps. Anyway, let me check the time. I think I can take. Let me take one question, and then we clear up with the slide deck, and then we can address the others. So, is there any threat allowing applications like Telegram, such to access your contacts? How will you differentiate those applications to allow and those not to allow? Again, go to your settings, go to your mobile settings, on the applications, or permissions, whichever. If you go to permissions, it will show you for the various things that are in your phone, which applications are using those permissions. Or rather, if you go to your applications, it will show you the application, for example, Telegram. And then if you click in on Telegram, you can go to the permissions and then see all the permissions that Telegram has giving it access to various resources within your phone. So, okay, let's See the Q&A here. Mm. 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 Okay, I think some of these we will address in the end. Uh, just give me a minute. Let me take one. Let me take one here. Mm. How do you avoid phishing? I think that we've already discussed. Generally, just look for pointers, things that tell you that a certain particular communication might not be legitimate. Things like the type of fonts, the nature of the writing, whether you expected that communication or not, spelling, etc., right? And then most importantly, always verify. Always verify if a link is legitimate, if you expected a certain communication, if the person who has sent it is actually the person who has sent it, no, that would really help you. Okay. What is a ransomware? I think we've addressed that. Um, how can I stop hacking of my social media platform? Well, first, just don't. It's very dynamic, if you think about it, because there are cases where you hear, oh, my Facebook was hacked or my Instagram was hacked, and I'm not the one who posted those pictures and all that. One, your passwords can be obtained, right, by certain techniques, things like brute forcing, things like just kawaida guesswork based off on your profile, things you like, what you post online, etc., etc. I mean, passwords can be, with enough, if someone has enough intention, maybe the capability, the skills, the knowledge, the tools, might be able to find your username and password. Then even so, the whole chain of the social media platform, there could still be inside activities that might lead to your account being spilled over. It could be that data has been accessed and linked on the dark web, and so someone can be able to find your credentials, right? So there are certain scenarios that are clearly not has nothing to do with you as a user. Yeah. So you might just end up finding your account posting things that you have no idea about. You might even be locked out. You're actually locked out of your own account. Yeah. Yeah. So it really depends, really. Really depends. But at least what you can do is make sure you don't don't use easy passwords. Don't put the password of the name of your dog, the name of your favorite town. Yet some of your friends could already know, can even guess your favorite town. What does that tell them? They can easily decide to use your email and the name of your favorite town and just try it and guess, and it works, right? So use hard passwords. Don't share your passwords. Don't post your password. Write your passwords in sticky notes and then put them in your corner of your bedroom somewhere. Someone can just walk in and see because you forgot to remove the sticky note and things like that. So if you get the point, I'm just try to practice hygiene around your credentials. I mean, those are some of the things you can do, but there are many others that you might not be able to control. Okay.
Kisiwa kuungana na waasi wa M23.
Simon, I think there's someone who has a mic on. Okay, yeah, so let's proceed and then we'll address the rest of the question as we finish. We only have one or two slides remaining. Anyway, so some of the high level, I think, useful challenges to understand. And this is not just individually now. This is because, like I said, um, all of us are part of organizations. Your organization relies on you to be able to ensure cybersecurity, but you also have a role to play to ensure that to ensure your own personal security and the security of your own organization. Remember, good organizations will have certain policies, certain guidelines of how you need to behave, how you need to use systems, how you need to ensure safety in all sorts of ways. So you as a worker needs to abide by those policies. Otherwise, if you do not, you might end up having personal liability, right? Where you alone, you yourself and you alone gets to what do you call it, to pay damages, or gets to bear the burden of a breach, things like that. And we see that even now with data privacy. So it's important to be able to know to understand these, um, because it's a whole shared responsibility. It's cybersecurity is a shared responsibility for all of us. So having said that, a few key things. I know for sure government relies a lot on legacy systems, fortunately and unfortunately. And I would say fortunately, I'll say why fortunate. I'll give a case. But yeah, a lot unfortunately, government relies still a lot on legacy systems. There's a bunch of outdated infrastructure, a bunch of outdated systems, bunch of outdated applications. Um, you know, um, and even private sector. In some private sector areas, there's definitely a lot of good old systems that are still running and managing business operations. And well, the challenge of this is because one, most of these business systems don't get to have updates, either because updates were discontinued and maintenance were discontinued, and so uh, they're using very old version of those systems, which have weaknesses, which have vulnerabilities that can then be used by hackers to be able to to get to those systems and cause havoc. Um, I know there's a case. So there's a ransomware that came about last year. And this ransomware attacked a lot of companies worldwide, actually, a lot of big companies worldwide, because um, um, because they were using a certain application. I think that was Microsoft. So there are certain Microsoft applications that were affected by a certain malware. But apparently, there's an aviation company in the US that was not affected by a certain ransomware, and the reason was because that aviation company was actually using a very old version of Windows, right? Of that Windows application. They're using an older version, so that older version was not susceptible to that particular malware, right? So for them, that was a very fortunate case because the nature of that malware was not designed to be able to or could not figure out a way to attack that older version of the Windows, but the rest of the Windows, uh, uh, then especially the later versions, were susceptible to that particular malware. That's a case of a fortunate situation. But generally, the idea is that systems have to have upgrades, either upgrade that old system to newer versions or just adopt a whole new modern system to be able to do the work, because modern system is more upgradable, more updatable, more interoperable, can have interoperability with other systems and all of that stuff. But generally, what you see with legacy systems is that they get protection from various other layers of security defenses around them. So it could be security at the endpoint devices, it could be security um, um, at the network layer, it could be security for physical hardware devices that are there, or sometimes, air gapping could still be a possible complementary solution. By air gap here, I mean some certain systems are just not connected to the internet, right? So if someone needs to do something on those systems, they have to be on site. They have to be there physically, be able um, to run those systems in physical. And this happens a lot in operational technology environment. Your industries, your factories, your water plants, water sewerage plants, and all of that stuff. So you have these physical embedded systems that might not be would not be connected to the internet, and then that then can provide some form of a little, space in terms of um, them not being susceptible to internet-based kind of attacks. But it doesn't mean that they're fully secure. No, we need complementary security measures, including even physical security measures. Yeah. So legacy system is definitely a big problem in government, coupled with budget constraints. Of course, even updating systems of buying whole new modern systems, and the whole process of patches, the whole process of implementation, the whole process of changeover, change management. It costs money, time, lots of effort, lots of skills. It's expensive, so budget constraints is always an issue. Yeah. As much as government is not in the business of saving money, still budget constraints are an issue based on the many competing interests. So that then reduces terms of investment and effort towards adopting next level new generation, systems, and particularly security technologies for those particular systems, including acquiring the skilled personnel that is needed. Remember, how then do you match the payment rates for security skilled labor in the private sector, right? Most of the time, government doesn't pay as much as the private sector, so that then can become a challenge to get the nicely highly skilled individuals into government workforce. So those are general challenges. Of course, right now we have a lot of dynamism within the regulatory space, as we have seen, of course, in the last 5 and slightly more years. So we have all these new raft of laws. We have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act. We have Data Protection Act. We have the Critical Infrastructure Act. We have all these digital transformation-based acts. One recent one that I like is the Digital Health Act, which is going to bring a whole new, healthcare management regime, into place. All of these things, government also has to remember. Government is the one that sets policy, and it sets the tone for um, regulatory changes, right? But this same government also needs to be able to keep up with some of these standards, some of these requirements, and all of that stuff. So then keeping up with these things requires work, requires effort. And then the regulatory environment can be challenging and complex because of all these new requirements that are in place. But then one thing to note is that cybersecurity and data protection are not mutually exclusive. Here we mean is that when you have cybersecurity, it doesn't mean that you should not invest in data protection. You have to invest in both at the same time. And in fact, good data protection requires cybersecurity, even though you can have good cybersecurity without data protection, as we know it, right? So there's this overlap, across all of these things. But the bottom line is that the objectives overlap, and it is important to be able to have both security and data privacy. I've already mentioned in terms of the talent and the skill and the workforce. I think, yeah, government should definitely step up in terms of parks and particularly salaries for skilled technical staff. But again, that is a challenge that is pretty much in a lot of places. So it's an open competitive market. So yeah. A key interesting thing here is what you call capability transfer. And I consider this more or less like an opportunity. When you talk about capability transfer, I think government has huge opportunity in terms of collaborations with other governments, collaboration with other um, high level, well established, well developed research development entities, etc., globally, right? So government can have access to some of these very unique high level opportunities, in terms of getting technology, getting access to all forms of emerging tech and all that. And then also in terms of skills. Yeah, I mean, skills development opportunities, trainings, research, exchange programs. I think those are very useful. Um, you know, and then lastly, of course, even in terms of the research and the development, I do think government has huge capability to be able to cross exchange with other partners, development partners, and other nations and all that to bolster security. I mean, research and development that can help not only the government but even the private sector. So I think this could be interesting opportunity areas. And even now, of course, with now the emerging technologies that I hear, I do think there's opportunity for a lot of these tech skills, research, development work. So I think that you can discuss tomorrow. But for now, I think that is the end of the presentation. I mean, our session for today. So, Simon, are you in the room? Looking at.
I'm around. You can hear.
Good. Yes. Okay. Let me see if I can take a bunch of questions. So let me know when we can close. But in the meantime, let me
I think
take
we can use the remaining few minutes to. I don't know if you have, there are some questions you have been addressing. Are they from the question and answer part?
It's actually both. It's both the Q&A and the chat.
Oh, then I think that's okay. There are two
Mm.
people raising their hands. Maybe I'll just unmute them. I don't know. Maybe they're not able to type. Let me unmute them. I have Antonio and Eric and Calvary. I think I'll go with those two. So I'll start with Antonio. Antonio, if you can hear me, you can unmute. Your hand is up.
Okay. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Camille.
Okay. Sir, I have a question. Since we all attend to your um session on this meeting up about the awareness pub- for the cybersecurity, sir. What is your advice for the future generation that will more on AI users, sir? Since like students nowadays using chat GPTs, and is it true that AI is um more dangerous, sir? Even if you know how to avoid the said attacks like phishing, sir. Mm-mm.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. There's no technology that has no pros and cons. That's just a fact. Same way every human has their own goodness and badness, if I can use that word. But then we tend a lot to talk about all the negative things about AI. Well, we, we, we can tend to like take one or two scenarios of how the AI can be bad or a certain technology can be bad and forget the 100 other things that it can actually do good, right? So I probably that's just a human tendency. We like we like to focus on the negative a lot, more like projecting your fears and your anxieties first before you look at all the positives. But having said that, I mean the thing is uh, AI is good, but AI is just a tool, to be honest. AI is just a tool. I mean, sometimes I I like to think we overcomplicate this thing, we overthink it, but essentially it's just pure science. It's just pure science, pure maths, machine, computer science, and all that stuff. And if you can really simplify it, that hey, it's a tool, it's a digital tool, it has its advanced capabilities, and it can just help you get things done. Whatever those things are, then you can appreciate that hey, um, um, there are places where it can fail, and there are a lot of many places it can succeed. But anyway, I think at the end of the day, even for, as you've mentioned, students and all that stuff, I think it doesn't take away the fact that especially as a learner, probably lifelong learner, you still have to do hard reading. It's not a question of now being lax, being too, getting too convenient and all that. I think you still need to put in the work in terms of building your own mental capabilities, man, critical thinking, especially because now there's too much information. But then, how do you sort out the signal from the noise, right? And so you need that consciousness, that critical thinking. Those fundamentals never go away, right? Those conservative things don't go away. So that would be my thinking on that. Simon, you can get the other two live, and then we can check the chat.
Thank you very
Sir,
much.
sir, wait, sir. Sir, excuse me, sir. After this, sir, can you provide us a certification, sir, so that we have something to present at our school, sir, that we join your session, sir, your discussion about this topic, sir.
I think
Mm-mm.
the organizers
Because,
would
sir,
have
you
they
know, sir, to be honest, that's why I joined this session, sir. We need 10, 10 webinars. We need 10 webinars, sir, to join. So now I just have 9, sir, left. Uh, this is one of the requirements for us to graduate, sir.
I think the
Okay,
organizers would
I can help you respond to that. We have Gwen who represents the ICT authority, and as we end the session in the next few minutes, I'll give her the privilege to crown it all for us, and she'll clarify the issue of certification and any other needed item if it's not, maybe for your reference, because I believe everyone who has joined, I can see over 450 to 500, you actually deserve maybe to get the notes and a certification of proof. And remember, these sessions are going on for 3 days. From today, we'll have tomorrow, same time, and the third day, where we will even be joined by the data commissioner. So I think, Camille, your request will be taken care of, and maybe I can move to the next uh, question. I can see someone else hand was up, but ni kama amerudisha chini. I'm trying to check on the participants. I think it was Calvary Musungu. Uh, the hand is down again. Okay, if there's no one else whose hand is up, I think the other hands wanted to address the issue of the certification as well, because I can see most hands have gone down.
okay.
We have Ian. Let's have Ian, then we can invite Gwen. Let's have Ian, then we can invite Gwen. Ian, you can unmute.
Okay, do you hear?
Yeah, I just heard you, then you disappeared.
Okay, my question is still on Google. Like, if you go to Google, you go to a site, then they suggest a strong password for you. So, should we use that suggested strong password and save it on a Google account, or like, is it advisable or not?
And I wouldn't advise. I wouldn't advise, because anyway, if you use it, Google will store it for you, potentially on the browser. And I also saw a question here about storing the passwords of the browser. Do not store passwords of the browser by any chance. I know Google has a password storage feature. Do not use it, right? Essentially, what best thing you can do, get a proper password manager, which probably be a third-party tool. The better yet, get I know there are open source tools, password manager tools that you have to do a whole setup for. If you can do that, figure out how to do that. But essentially, you can buy third-party ones like LastPass, 1Password, etc. But then, if you're an organization and you probably have your Microsoft suite, etc., those ones, I think they typically come with some. I don't know. Depending on your setup, you could get some form of a password managing solution. So whichever works for you, but do not put passwords on your browser.
Okay.
Simon, I think I can take a few questions. Let me see here. What is the best security tool in the social media? Is it Passkey 2FA? If you can use Passkey, the better. I know a bunch of common sites have introduced Passkey. If you can use Passkey, if you have the patience to set it up and follow it through, please use Passkey. But 2FA is still as viable, that is for gems. And then I see Jen Gisheru, how secure are the QR which have been overused these days? QR, of course, are not secure. One, QR codes can be cloned. And so you might think you are actually scanning the authorized QR code, but then it's actually a clone, or it's actually a whole different one, right? Because anyway, they're just ways to, what do we call them? It's some form of what we call steganography, where you hide a piece of data within another piece of data, because these QR are just images, right? So within that image, you've hidden a link. So if you're able to scan using your QR scanner, then it can be able to decode and then get that link, and then you're able to click that link and visit it on your browser, right? So just be careful, be careful with that. Alternatively, can't use QR. I don't. If you are technically savvy, you might consider options like tokenizations or things like that. So, Jen, Daniel says, I have a question on how safe is our data, mostly when interacting with Gen AI, like ChatGPT and DeepSeek. Well, like I said, AI is just a tool. It's like your Facebook, your Google, your whatever. So you have to put in some data for you to be able to use these services, right? And remember, for you to use these services also have consumed a lot of data, large data, big data, because they are called large language models, right? So all the training that happens can use part of your data as scrap data from someone and use that data for training. So point is, do not share your sensitive data with these chat GPTs and DeepSeeks and all the other AI, conversational AI platforms or agents that you use. Do not share sensitive information, right? Let me see. It's not safe. David Ocheng, is it possible to completely and permanently wipe out one's digital footprint? That's an expensive affair. Unlikely for any layman to just pursue that. So, how can I enter the dark web? Well, sorry, just Google that stuff. Wouldn't answer that. But think of anonymization tools like Tor. Tor is the good place to start. So Google Tor, read documents, search about it, might help you figure it out. Rosemary says, if you delete those cookies, do the files generally get deleted too? Well, that is the idea. That is the idea. So you can go to a particular website. Normally, where you remember where I said you can find the padlock, the red or the green padlock. There's always where it is written HTTPS or something like that. There's a place you can click there, and it will give for you a pop-up. That pop-up you can I think there's a place for cookies and cache or something like that. So or rather just go to settings in the browser, go to that particular browser, that particular web page or website that you visited, look at the cookies there. You can delete those cookies. The idea is that when you delete them there, they need to get deleted. But of course we know, because they're in your laptop, I mean they're on your PC. For those who might be a bit more wants to explore it further, you might want to think of the actual files within the hard disk, because remember, even that browser is installed on the laptop. So the laptops, there's a folder in the C drive. There's a folder in the C drive for that particular browser where all these activities, your history or whatever, your passwords, whatever they are stored. So if you want to go further, that's okay. But generally, if you delete those cookies, those files need to be deleted. Rosemary, is there a difference between cybersecurity and ethical hacking, or are they one and the same? Well, cybersecurity is a larger practice. Hacking is the art of trying to break stuff down, right? Breaking stuff and probably building them back up. Remember, the idea of hacking came from MIT back in the day, Kitambo, where it was just a thing where guys would get together and break stuff, systems, gadgets, just rip it down to pieces and then figure out how to build it back. So right now, when you say ethical hacking, we're just saying, hey, if you want to break something down, just be ethical about it, which includes also firstly getting permission, authorization to do it. So that's how it's applied within the security space. Okay. Hello, when you log into some websites, you notice that you cannot go ahead without accepting cookies, that this expose you. Yes, it does. When they force you to accept those cookies, they're basically saying either use our service or you don't, right? So the choice is yours. You might want to look for an alternative service provider, right? But ideally, especially the new data protection requirements, they need to provide you an extensive cookie banner that gives you choices of one, accepting all cookies, two, adjusting your cookie preferences, or three, rejecting all of the cookies that are there, except of course the necessary ones, the ones that are super fundamental. I hope that helps. So someone says, okay, okay, okay. So how can you classify an incident where malicious attackers use remote access programs like AnyDesk to penetrate organization systems? Well, it's remote access. So if it is, remember, AnyDesk is just a third-party application. So whether it's your AnyDesk or any other collaboration tool, TeamViewer, all of that stuff. As long as there's remote desktop access or something like those protocols that are used for remote access, they're vulnerable to some form of what do you call them, interference, with that remote connection and stuff like that. So so there's a whole possibility of a hacker either also leveraging that legitimate remote access, right? Remember, it could be a legitimate remote access, which is AnyDesk or TeamViewer and all that. So hacker can intercept, and then use that either to sniff traffic, steal information, and all that stuff. So it depends. The attack here could be, or the threat could be snooping, eavesdropping, etc., etc. Okay, good. I think we can stop at that. There's so many questions. We can't handle all of them right now. So thank you guys. Thank you everyone for coming through. Appreciate you all. Hope that has added some value to you. But feel free to keep learning, and then hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow I think maybe you can have more questions. Simon.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Man, that was one a solid session. I've learned so much myself. I've been privileged to work in the IT department And some of the things you have shared have actually taken me a notch higher. I can't read all the comments that are congratulating you because there are so many. They're just trying to, everyone is appreciating the knowledge you have shared with them. In as much as we can't answer all the questions, I'm happy you have managed to tackle, I think, over 80% of the questions because I can see even most of them are repeated. And some of your answers have actually already answered some of the other questions that you might not have read. Norman Munir is saying he's from Pakistan and he actually thanks you for your sessions. He says they're amazing. He has learned so much from them. And I think you've also tackled his concern about cookies and websites. Now, on behalf of Capabuil as well, we want to thank you, the audience, for trusting this session and joining to listen to what ICT Authority and Capabuil have been able to prepare for you, especially for our expert trainer. One thing about webinars or virtual sessions is that if you can sit in a session and as a trainer you deliver and over 400 people, so close to 500 sit through the entire session, even if it's 3 hours, it means what you are sharing to them is actually very valuable and they are willing to even listen even more because most virtual sessions, even if they take an hour or two, most people start logging out. You might start with a very high number of people, 600, and then by the time you're halfway, you're only left with 20 people listening, and maybe even wherever they are, the device is just on, but they have turned their attention to other things. But having almost the same number from start to finish is an indicator that you have actually shared something that is very critical and they have been willing to listen to even more of it. So I'll stop there and give Gwen a chance to crown it up for us. Then we can switch gears to our evening schedule as we wait for the other session tomorrow. Gwen, if you're still with us, you can take over the mic, please.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, Cephas, for that elaborate and very interesting training. I also been following through. I've really enjoyed. It was quite informative. And I also wish to thank our participants for staying and holding on up to this time of your busy schedule. Thank you very much for paying attention. And we hope to see you tomorrow. Just a clarity on the assessment. Assessment is online. Even the certificate, you'll receive it online. This is just an assessment to gauge your understanding of this particular training. So the training is 3 days, today, tomorrow, and Thursday. And then you'll have some notes you go through. Then you get a link for your assignment. The assignment, should you not get it right the first time, keep trying. You have more options to keep trying. Don't give up until you get it right. So you will finally get a certificate of Thank you very much, able trainer Sifa, and thank you very much all our participants. We hope to see you tomorrow, same time at 5:30 p.m. Thank you. On Thursday, log in. Let's join our data commissioner. And before our data commissioner, we'll still have Cephas to continue with the data protection as we wait for our data commissioner to come in. Thank you all. Bye for now.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Cephas. We can't wait to hear you tomorrow.